If you've got an Amazon Fire TV stick or any other Android TV device, you can easily play real arcade and console games from the 70s, 80s and 90s using free emulation software. Let me show you how. Hi and welcome to Bytes and Bits. Retro arcade and console gaming is a great way to get even more fun out of your TV. But you do need some sort of computer to make it work. Now luckily, many of us already have a mini computer system plugged in and running our streaming services. So if you've got some sort of Android TV device, such as the Amazon Fire TV modules, then you've got all the computing power you need to play arcade games and all the consoles from the 80s and 90s. That gives you over 20 years worth of classic titles to either relive or play for the first time. And the best part is that with emulation, you get to play the original games exactly as they would have played on the original consoles and arcade cabinets. We're not going to be playing remakes, just the real thing. So let me show you how to turn your Amazon Fire TV stick into any arcade cabinet or retro console in just a few simple steps. To be able to play our arcade games and console games on our Fire TV stick, and we are going to need a couple of extra pieces. So at the moment our Fire TV stick, and I've got a 4K Max device here, they don't have a lot of internal storage in them. So this one here has 16 gigabytes. Now a lot of our games, as soon as we start loading up sort of a couple of hundred games, that's easily going to eat all of that up. So we do need some way of attaching some extra storage. So I'm going to be using a little USB thumb drive for mine. So this is a 64 gigabyte little plug-in SanDisk one. But of course there's nowhere to plug this in, and there's only one port actually on our Fire TV stick. And usually of course that then is used for our power, but it is actually a full USB port. So we can actually use a special adapter. So I've got what's known as an on-the-go cable here, and what this does is it actually has our power input coming here. We then have, of course, the device plugging into our Fire TV stick there. What the other end of this then does is it allows us to have an actual USB port here. So we have one USB port there. So our normal power lead will come in there, so that's our power coming into our device, and that then allows me to plug my USB drive into here or any other device I want in there. But that gives us then our Fire TV stick able to have an extra, well, however much storage you want to attach on here. So for my arcade games and console games, 64 gigabytes is going to give me enough. If we wanted to do a bit more, obviously I can just add a bigger USB drive. So that's our setup that we're going to need. So again, these on-the-go cables, they cost about sort of between £5 and £10, available of course through Amazon, and I'll put some links to those in the description down below, as well as the sort of the little thumb drive that I'm using here as well. So that's going to be our basic setup then. Now, as well as having some extra storage, we are going to need some way of playing our games. So we're going to need some sort of game controller. Now, I think you can use the TV Fire remote, but I think that is a really awkward way of doing it. So you will probably want to get hold of some sort of game controller. Now, this, of course, is going to need to connect to your Fire TV over Bluetooth. You can get more than one USB port out of here, but it just becomes a bit awkward, especially if this is going to be round the back of your TV. So I would strongly advise you go for a Bluetooth controller, and it does need to be one that can connect to Android devices. So I'm going to use my GameSir. This is the Nova 2 Lite controller, which again is a really nice controller, and it does have a special Android Bluetooth mode, which really works well with the Fire TV. So again, I'll put links to this down in the description if you want to get hold of one of these. But that then, of course, is the last bit of hardware that we're going to need. So let's see if we can now get the software set up and get headed towards turning our Fire TV into a retro gaming system. So first off, we need to make sure that our USB drive is ready for use with our Amazon TV device. So these devices need the drive to be formatted as an FAT32 drive. Now to do that, we're going to use a package called Rufus. So if you head across to rufus.ie, you'll come to this page. Let me get rid of these adverts. And all you need to do is scroll down here, and eventually you'll get to some downloads. So there's some downloads here. So again, this is a Windows-based application. If you're running on Mac or Linux, then you just need to find an application that allows you to format drives as an FAT32 drives in your system. Now, if you are using a drive larger than 32 gigabytes, especially if you're on Windows, you'll find that the standard Windows format tool doesn't allow you to do that. It forces you to use XFAT. But we need this formatted as an FAT32, so you will need some sort of special tool to allow you to do that. So all we need to do is we just simply need to download Rufus and put that onto our hard drive. Once we've got that downloaded, if we then go to our download, we simply need to start Rufus. And that will come up with this sort of window here. And again, depending on what application you're using, you'll find similar options. Okay, so first off, we need to make sure that we're looking at the correct drive. So make sure you are looking at your USB drive. Please do not format anything else. On Rufus then, where it says boot selection, Rufus is very handy for making bootable drives, but we don't want this to be bootable. We just want it to be a standard data drive. So we're going to say it's a non-bootable drive. The partition scheme must be MBR. So if you have options for MBR or GPT, it needs to be MBR. If you don't get that option, then by default it probably will be MBR. We then come down, we can give the drive a label. So I'm going to call this my gaming drive. And we want the format then to be FAT32. So you can see here, because I'm using a 64 gigabyte drive, it's saying it's going to use the large FAT32 formatting, and that is what we want. If it offers you a cluster size, just leave that at the default. So I've got my correct drive, MBR, I'm formatting it as FAT32, and I can just start that off and do that. So of course it's warning me here that everything on this drive is going to be wiped. So we need to do this as the very first stage on preparing our USB drive. If you can't come back and do this after you've copied the files, obviously, because they will be wiped off. So let's OK that. And you can see there it was deleting the partitions, writing in the new partitions, and that is our drive now ready to go. So I close that down. We should find that in our drive here, we have our gaming drive here. And if I click on the properties for that, and bring that up for you, it's formatted as FAT32, and we have our, 57 gigabytes once it's been formatted. So that's all ready for us to use now. To make our retro gaming machine, we're going to need some bits of software. And the first thing we're going to need is some emulators. And the best way to do this is using a package called RetroArch. So an emulator basically turns our Fire TV stick into either one of the consoles or the arcade machines that we want to play. And RetroArch is a multi-system emulator. So basically it is able to give us access to all of the different consoles. So it will actually handle booting up the correct emulator for various different consoles. Now, RetroArch itself is available on the Amazon App Store, so we can actually install that directly from the main interface on our Fire TV stick. So once we've got our emulators, all we need then are some game files that we're going to actually play on those emulators. And that's what we're going to be using our USB drive for. So I've created a games folder on my USB drive, and inside that I've assembled, inside each of their own folders, some game ROMs for each of the systems that I want to play. Now, the big question, of course, is where do you get hold of these game ROMs? You will have to have a look around online for those yourselves. YouTube does not allow us to give out direct links to these things, but please do have a look at the project page that I tend to put up for each of these projects. And inside there, obviously, I'm able to help you out a little bit more. So inside each of these folders then, so if I look at my Atari 2600, so this is the original Atari game system, you'll see in there we have various games, and these are the actual ROM files from the original cartridges. So whenever we emulate, we're not playing remakes of the games, we're actually playing the real games from the real consoles. So again, you can see I've got a number of games files inside there. Similarly, in these ones here, my Mega Drive folder, I've got some files, and my Super NES and so on. We have all those game files. The arcade ones are slightly different, so we're actually using something called MAME. So RetroArch has got a version of MAME built into it that we can use, and that is MAME 2003 Plus. So if you are looking for arcade ROM sets, so inside here I've got a few ROMs. The best ones to use are the MAME 2003 Plus ROM set. That just gives best compatibility, and it doesn't take up too much file size. MAME ROMs are a bit more complicated to use, so I have produced a number of videos which show you specifically how to get those set up and what you need to get hold of in terms of what type of ROM set you need. So the easiest way to set these up is to actually download a full ROM set, and that will just get you every single arcade game from the sort of 80s, 90s and so on. But again, please do have a look at those videos to see how to get that set up. I'm not going to go into the fine details of it here, but just bear in mind that once you get a set of ROMs in here, then we can start hooking that into our RetroArch. So now we've got our game files already, it's time to move over to the Fire TV stick and get things set up on there. So I've got my Fire TV set up, and I have the on-the-go programming cable plugged into that. Now I haven't yet plugged in my USB drive. So if I plug that in, we might find a little message pops up. And this is the Fire TV saying that it doesn't quite understand what we want to do with that USB device. So if I press the little menu button for that, we should get to this menu here. And what it's saying here is that the USB drive has got a file system on there which it can't use with apps. So what it's saying here is that that's putting apps onto the drive. So we want this as an actual data drive and not as an extension app drive. So we actually want to say that we know we do not want it to format it here. Obviously, if we format it, it's going to clear everything we've just put onto that drive, and it will then turn it into a drive specifically for your Fire TV stick. So we won't be able to take it out and put more of our games on. So make sure that if you do get this coming up, or if it talks about formatting it as either an internal or external drive, so we either want to format it as an external drive, or in this case here where it's asking us to format it here, we want to say no. So just in case you get either of those messages, so it doesn't really sort of mess up your USB setup. So I'm just going to say no to that, and that should take us back to our home screen. So the first thing we're going to do is to set up our game controller. As we start to install RetroArch and iGShow, they both work best with controllers. So we're going to sort of set that up so we're all ready to go. To do that, we need to go across to our settings area and then down to our remotes and Bluetooth devices. We're then going to go to game controllers and we're going to add a new controller. So our Fire TV stick is now searching for game controllers that it can pair with. So you need to put your controller into its pairing mode, and there you can see it's now found my GameSir controller. So I need to use my TV stick remote to select that, and that will then pair our TV stick with our game controller. So I can now use the D-pad on my game controller to move around. My B button is the back button, and I can come out of there. So that's that controller all set up. So if we now go back up to our home screen, we now need to install some bits of software from the App Store. So if we come across to our apps area and come down to the Get More Apps box here, that should take us across to the Amazon App Store. So we're going to want to go and search for some apps. So if I come down and go to search, and if we then start typing in RetroArch, and there we have RetroArch down in the search. So if I highlight that, so that's the actual application we want. So let's come through here, and then let's install that. So once RetroArch has finished installing, we can actually open that app up as well. And again, it's going to need access to our storage, because again, it obviously needs to go off and find our ROM files. So just make sure you allow access. And then RetroArch will do a little bit of setting up itself, so just wait until it gets to this screen here. So when RetroArch first boots up, it's not actually connected to a controller. It's going to latch on to the first controller it sees being used. So we want to use your game controller rather than your remote. So I've got my game controller already connected, and I'm just simply going to press the up button on that. And you can see that it's now recognized that game controller and has attached it to port 1, which is the main sort of port. And you can see that I've actually moved up on the menu. So we now are using our game controller to navigate through this, and that's what we need to have in place at the moment. So RetroArch is going to provide us with the actual emulation of the consoles. And it's quite a complicated system. We're not going to do the full setup here. We're just going to get the basic setup we need to get up and running with games. So there is a lot you can explore. And the way it works is that we have sort of like a menu options down on the left-hand side here. And you can see that that then gives us lots of other actual things we can do on the right-hand side. So we're going to set up just the basic operation. So if you go to your main menu, and then come across, the first thing we're going to do is make sure that all of the information inside RetroArch is up to date. So we're going to go to this thing called the Online Updater. So the navigation for this then is that you will use the south button on your controller. So that's if you're on an Xbox, that'll be the A button, or if you're on a PlayStation, that'll be the X button. That selects options, and then the east button, which is the B button on your Xbox controller, or the circle button, gives you back. So it gives me back and select. So we want to come down here, and we want to come down to where it has a list of these update options. So these are all the different files that RetroArch uses to understand about games and so on like that. So we just need to go through each of these options in turn and run them. So I'm going to update my core file infos, and then just simply move down and do the rest as well. So once I've updated all of those, I can then come up. So this Online Updater, it also has something called a core downloader. So cores are the individual bits of software that tell RetroArch how to emulate a particular system. So we're going to need to go through and download the cores that we want to use for our systems. So if we come into the core downloader section, you'll see that there are an awful lot of cores to choose from, and quite a few cores actually cover the same emulation. So here we have our arcade section, and you can see there's a whole range of different ways in which you can emulate your arcade systems. Now we've already had a chat about which ROM set to use. So we said that the MAME 2003 Plus ROM set was the best one to use for this for our Amazon Fire TV. So obviously we'll then need to install the MAME 2003 Plus core. So that's what we have in here. So to do that, you can see I've already installed it with that little sort of hash mark at the end of the line there, but you simply highlight it. You then just press the OK button, and that then will download and install that core into your RetroArch. And again, we can sort of move away down here. So for Atari then, for the 2600, I use the Stella core. And again, you can see that's already installed. So I would just install that. Now, which cores you need to use for each system, again, different people have different ideas. And there are the cores themselves, they're designed for certain situations. So some cores are more optimized for speed than others, and that then helps you on lower powered systems such as your Amazon Fire TV. Some then, of course, are able to make use of your full desktop and graphics cards and so on, to give you sort of really, really high quality, accurate emulation, but of course at the penalty of needing more powerful systems. So I'll put a list up of what I'm going to be using today for the systems that we're looking at. And again, all this information will be on the main project page for this website. So do check in the description there for a link out to that. And again, on there as well, I can also give you a bit more of a help on finding the ROMs themselves. But I'm going to go through then and just install the cores that I need for our selection of systems. So that's all my cores installed. So I can now come back out of here. So we've updated our files. We've installed our cores. So if we come back out of here, the next thing I want to do is the game controller is pretty much working as it should do at the moment. But one thing we do need to go through is just make sure that we've got all of the controls properly mapped. So if we go into our settings section and down to input, we can go to our RetroPad binds, and this tells us what controls are bound to each of the buttons on our controller. So we're into our port 1 controls. So again, you can see in here, the device index, it has selected my GameSir Nova 2 Lite. One point here, if you are to change the device index, you can actually lock your controller out of RetroArch, and you have to go and restart RetroArch again. So do make sure that you have pressed the button on your controller and got your controller logged in and bound to before you come in here to start playing with things. So the top button here, we're analog to digital type. So most of the emulation uses the D-pad for sort of the left, right, up and down movement, but you can actually then have it remap one of your analog sticks to that as well. So you can either then play with the D-pad or the analog stick. So here I have my left analog stick mapped into my D-pad. So that just lets me either choose to use the joystick or the D-pad itself. Coming down then, one of the main things we need to do here is to set our controls. So if I come down a bit further here, you can see here that it has a list of all the buttons that the controller needs to have, and then how they're actually mapped on the controller itself. So in general, RetroArch will be able to get that worked out for you. But we can, of course, go through and just remap those just to make sure that we have everything the way we want it. So I'm going to use this Set All Controls feature. And what that will do, it will come down here and it will actually go through each of these mappings in turn and will ask me to press and hold down a button. So you do need to be ready to watch what's on screen and press the right buttons. So whenever it talks about north, south, east and west, those are the four sort of A, B, X, Y or the cross, circle, triangle, square buttons. And again, use the 4 points of the compass as they relate to those four buttons. So on my Xbox controller, the Y button is at the top of the four buttons in the north position. And of course, that would be where the triangle button is on your PlayStation. So I'm just going to go through this and set them all up. So I'm going to select Set All Controls and then just follow the instructions on screen. So once you've gone through setting all of those, that should be our game controller then properly mapped into the system. So if I come down here, I can now save my controller profile. And what will happen here, it'll make us a note of what we've just set up and create a file. So the next time that it sees this controller being attached, it will use that file just to make sure that we get back to our proper setup. So I'm just going to click on that, and that should then save that for me. So the next step then is to make sure that we have some control buttons set up. And this is really going to help us navigate into and out of RetroArch when we're playing games. So to do this, we need to come back up. We need to come out of here and back to our input section. And we're going to set up something called hotkeys. So we just select into that. And the way this works then is we're going to have something called a hotkey enable button, which is usually the select button on your controller. And what will happen then is when we hold that button down and then press another button on our controller, that will then perform some action. And again, the action we're going to set up here is being able to quit out of a game, which will then take us back to our game selection. Otherwise, we would have to actually just reset the Fire TV stick to get back out of a game. So obviously this is a pretty handy thing to be able to do. So first up then, we have to set our hotkey enable button, and this is going to work very much like our key mapping system, where we're going to select this. It's then going to ask us to hold down the button that we want to make our hotkey enable button, and that will then log that. So if I select this, and I'm going to prepare then, get ready to press my select button when it asks for it. So I hold my select button, and that is now bound to that. And you can see it tells you a little bit of what's going on here. So let's OK that. So we now have my hotkey enable button is set. So what we want to do now is we want to create a hotkey then for close content. So when we're running a game, the game itself is called the content that we're running. We want to be able to then quit out of that game and drop back into our game selection menu so that we can then go off and play something else. So again here, the normal one here is to set this to the start button. So if you want to quit out of a game, you hold down select and start, and that should quit out of the game. So again, I'm going to select that. I then hold down my start button until it's recognized, and I now have that all set up. Again, you can see in here there are lots of other things you can do as regards various hotkeys and so on things. Again, one of the useful things in here, there's one which allows you to save state. But again, lots and lots of things you can do with RetroArch, which we're not really going to cover here. We're just getting ourselves set up so we can play it. So I'm going to come back out of here, and we're going to come back out to our main settings area. I'm going to go back to our main menu. As I say, I have already produced various guides which take you a bit more into RetroArch. I will probably quite soon make one which is just specifically on setting up RetroArch and getting everything just the way you want it. So do please make sure you look out for that. And don't forget, if you subscribe to the channel, obviously you'll get access to these videos as I produce them. But for us at the moment then, that's all we want to do. So we've got our core set up, all updated, we've got our hotkey mapped. That's us ready now to actually play some games. So to get games installed, we simply need to go from our main menu, come across and come down to the import content option. So if we select that, what this will do, this will let us go out and find our game files. So this is one of the reasons why we put them all into their own separate folders. So if we go out and scan a directory, we can come down to our storage on here. So we really just have to find our USB drive. And our USB drive will tend to be the one with numbers attached to it. So if we go out on there, you can now see that we have our games folders and all of the game folders then that we created. So I'm going to come down and we're going to start off with our arcade games. So I'm going to select that. And then we know that that's where our arcade game files are. So I'm going to say scan this directory. And that will set the system going off looking at all the files inside there, and it's actually looking inside those zip files to see if it can find games, and it should then come back to us with a set of games that it's found. So once the scan's finished, we can back out of here and go back to our main home screen, and we should now find that we have a playlist down the bottom here. And again, it's identified what the games are, and it's automatically then, in effect, sort of assigned them to one of the emulators. So although it does know that these are MAME 2003 Plus games, it hasn't actually fully committed to using that emulator. So it's really waiting for us to tell it exactly which emulator we need to use. So to do that, once we've imported our games, we need to come up to our settings menu and come across down here to our playlists option. And if we go in here, we can now manage our playlists, and we can now manage that 2003 Plus playlist. So again, you can see here how it sort of is going to display certain things. So we will be looking at thumbnails in a second, but we want to come down here and go to the default core. So what this is telling it is when you play a game from this playlist, which core to actually use. And you can see that if we look through here, it's a list of all of our installed cores. So of course we want to play our MAME games with our MAME 2003 Plus core. So I can then just set that. And we can then come down, and you can see there's other options we can do down here. So if I now back out of here, we should now find that if we come across to our playlist, our MAME 2003 playlist, if I go across into one of my games, I should be able to actually boot this up now, and it should drop straight into our MAME 2003 Plus emulator. And there we have our game all up and running. So if we want to actually play the game, the way this works then is that the buttons on your controller allow you to sort of access the sort of play, the start buttons and the coin buttons. So if you want to put a coin into the machine, you press your select button, and you can see I've now put a coin in there. If I want to then press the player 1 play button, I press my start button, and we're now into the actual arcade game. And again, for this one here, because we mapped our left analog stick, you can see that I can now use either my joystick or my actual D-pad. And that lets me then obviously play my game, and we're ready to go. So, to come out of that game then, again, we did set our hotkey, so I'm going to hold down my select button and press start. And that then drops me back into my game selections. So again, I can come back up here and I can go off and then play whatever other game I want to. So that is one system set up. And we just need to repeat this process now for each of the others. So let me go through and do that, and then we'll come back and have a look at how we can make this look a bit better. So that's all of my game folders scanned, and you can see we now have a list of all of our games. So all I need to do now is just complete that second half of the process, where I'm now going to go up and I'm going to go to my settings, and I'm going to manage my playlists and just set the default emulators for each. So there we now have everything all set up. So I should be able to just come down here. I should be able to see all of my games. I should be able to come down here, and if I want to play a Super Nintendo game, I should be able to just simply move across, pick out the one that I want, and just click into it, run it, and that should then boot up my game using that emulator, and I can now play pretty much any console that I want to. So really the last thing I want to take you through today is just how to make our playlists look a little bit better. So I'm sitting here in one of my playlists, and as I go across to select games, you can see that on the very right hand side there is a bit of information there and some space for some images and so on. So we need to actually download these. So these are the sort of game thumbnails. So if I actually select one of my games, if I come down a bit, you can see that we can do various things about cores and so on. So if you want to run a particular game on a different core to the rest of the games in its playlist, you can of course then set that in here. But we can also come down here and we can download thumbnails. So if I select that, that should go off and grab hold of some box art, and there you can see we have the box art for that Atari 2600 game. So if I come back out here, so as I browse through my games, you can see that I can start to build up a nice little interface where I can actually see what my games look like, or at least what the box art looks like. Now obviously I can go through here, and individual games which are missing I can go off, and I can obviously come in here and I can come down and download thumbnails. But it'd be easier if we could actually just get it to do them all in one go. So let's have a look at that. So if I come back out of here, if I come back up to my settings menu and then come across and go back to my playlist settings and my and then come down on here. So if I come down, you can see there's lots of different things we can do with our playlists. But one of the things down the bottom here, and when we get down to it, is we can set on-demand thumbnail downloads. So what this really does is when we open up a playlist, as we are browsing through, it will actually download our thumbnails as we go. And now this does of course then mean that as you're browsing your playlists, it will go a bit slower to begin with until it actually downloads those thumbnails. But it is a very quick way of getting your games all set up properly very quickly. So if I turn that to on, and if we come now back out of here, and if I come across to one of my playlists, so back to our 2600 playlist, and go across in there, you can see that it is now actually downloading these thumbnails and all as I browse through. And that very quickly then of course gets me all of my games all set up with all this nice artwork. And again, some of these may not be able to find thumbnails. So that one there, it hasn't picked it up. Obviously, I've got the wrong sort of ROM in there for it. But you can see now that we have all of these all set up and ready to go. So I can simply go through and do the same then with my other playlists and see if we can actually get some artwork coming down for these. So once we've got all that set up, really all that's left to do now is to actually have some fun playing some fantastic arcade and retro console games. So again, we've really just brushed the surface of this RetroArch and retro gaming on your Android Fire TV device. There's obviously loads of things we can do, so please do watch out for any sort of follow-up videos that I'm going to make. I will go more in detail into setting up RetroArch. Again, we can make the display look a lot more retro-like with adding scan lines and things like that, and also then, of course, fine-tuning the way the system works. So I hope you found this useful. Please do make sure that you click that like button and subscribe to the channel for lots more sort of gaming, modding, electronics and making projects. I look forward to seeing you again very soon, and bye for now. For more games programming, electronics projects and retro gaming, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel and visit my website.